Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Here's how the president described it when he was asked about these injuries.
I heard that they had headaches and a couple of other things, but I would say, and I can report, it is not very serious.
So I think
Veterans groups are calling for the president to apologize. Should he apologize for calling it not very serious?
He's not dismissing their injuries. He's describing.
He said they're headaches and not very serious.
I think he's describing their injuries. He's not dismissing their injuries. Head injuries can be
He
on
said
anywhere.
headaches. I don't consider them very serious.
Well, that's like saying that having a flesh wound is not very serious.
Well,
and
veterans
having
groups, and I know you're a veteran, and I know you know
and
people who've
veterans
suffered
have-
from
veterans
TBI,
have
as
different
do
point of
I.
view.
Don't you think it's serious and that the president may need to apologize?
I mean, if they are in fact, if all these injuries are not serious, if they're on the less serious side of the scale than the severe traumatic side of the scale, the president is just describing what happened to him. He's not dismissing them.
That is the repulsive Tom Cotton who thinks he'll be president one day from Arkansas. I mean, these are repugnant, repulsive individuals who denigrate traumatic brain injuries suffered as a retaliatory missile strike from Iran into our Iraqi soldiers' compound. I mean, now you've got the same situation with whether he was briefed, he wasn't briefed, he didn't know, he did know. Of course he knew. Of course he knew that Russia had put a bounty on the heads of our soldiers in Afghanistan. Now, you got these guys like Tom Cotton, you got these guys like John Cornyn. You know what John Cornyn from Texas said? He said, well, I think about whether or not the president remembered that he got briefed in writing, no less, which is discoverable, producible, knowable. And AP is reporting that he was briefed in writing in the presidential daily brief. And every former National Security Agency official has said, of course, the president would have that at the very top of his presidential daily brief because force protection is job number one for the commander in chief. Okay, that's set aside. Here's what Cornyn said. Well, I think the president can't single-handedly remember everything. I'm sure that he's briefed on, but the intelligence officials that briefed him, they're familiar with it. But then again, somebody's leaking classified information and then trying to further a narrative that isn't necessarily supported by the facts. Well, you know what? It is supported by the facts. Okay, here's to
the AP is reporting last night that in March of 2019, the president was briefed in the president's daily briefing about this attempt by the Russian intelligence services to use Taliban-linked militants to kill American troops. The president, the White House have nowhere to go from the corner they've painted themselves in. They said pointedly and clearly and flatly that the president was not briefed on this. You can believe the president, you can believe the White House press secretary, you can take the body of evidence of what they've told us over 3.5 years, or you can believe the intelligence people who are telling the Associated Press and the New York Times and the Washington Post and NBC News about what actually happened and that the president was briefed.
Of course the president was briefed. Of course he was. Here's the former National Security Advisor, Susan Rice.
Okay, so let me explain this. Intelligence comes in. If it's put in the president's daily briefing, which is a short but important summary of the most important information, it's provided to the president, the vice president, the National Security Advisor, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, on down. Everybody in the senior national security team gets this briefing 6 out of 7 days a week. So even if the president doesn't read his PDB, as it's known, which apparently he doesn't often do, then surely somebody around him would come in with this information and make sure that he was aware. If I'd been National Security Advisor and we received this kind of report of an arch adversary trying to kill U.S. forces. The first thing I would do is walk into the Oval Office and say, Mr. President, we have extremely troubling information that the Russians are trying to slaughter American forces by paying bounties to the Taliban. I will work with the intelligence community to chase this down and try to ensure that our information is solid. I will convene the National Security Council principals to work up options for you to respond. But please understand how serious this is. And then, Rachel, if down the road he decides he wants to call Vladimir Putin at least 6 times over the next few weeks, which apparently he did, and invite him to the G7 over the objections of all of our allies, I would have gone right back in there and said, Mr. President, what are you doing?
Okay, here's Jeremy Bash, who was the legal counsel for the CIA.
Jeremy, 3 former intelligence officials said there's no way this wasn't in the PDB. One former intelligence official said it would have been the first item in the PDB under a headline along the lines of threats to American soldiers in Afghanistan. Do you agree with that assessment?
I do. And not only that, but this is exactly the kind of information that would go up, for example, through the Defense Intelligence Agency or through the J2, the intel staff on the Joint Staff. This would get in the hands of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense, not to mention the CIA director and director of national intelligence. All of those people spent a lot of time with the president. It's inconceivable that for the last 6 months, not one of them said, hey, Mr. President, we have a direct threat to our troops. It is just outlandish, ridiculous. The fact that Kylie McEnany is standing there saying that, I think she's just insulting the intelligence of everybody who works in national security.
Oh, for God's sake.
I mean, how plain can people make it for you? It's not just, one man and some guy comes in the morning and he reads them a bunch of stuff. No, this is an entire community. It's the Defense Intelligence Agency. It's the DOD, the Department of Defense. It's the Vice President. It's the President. It's the National Security Advisor. This is just like COVID, okay? You have the CDC. You have the NIH. You have public health officials all throughout the executive branch, right? You've got this idea that Donald Trump doesn't know anything. I'm sorry, but it's inconceivable. So what you're left with is a man who is literally burning down America. Literally torching it. Because if he knows he's going to lose, everyone knows he's going to lose. Chris Christie was on TV saying that he was going to lose. Everybody knows he's going to lose, including him. He knows he's going to lose. And this is one of those examples of if I can't have her, nobody else can. This is the sick, psychotic mindset of a Donald Trump. If he can't be president of the United States, then there will be no United States. There will be a fractured region of the world on fire, writhing in agony, sick and dying. And a former, a shadow of its former self. It's time to call it what it is. This is treason. He called coronavirus the invisible enemy. I guess we're at war with that too. Treason. We are at war in Afghanistan. There was a bounty on the head of our soldiers. He totally ignored it or allowed it. Treason. Either way. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.